Black waitress abused by billionaire for not taking his tip. What she does next will leave you speechless. What if a single act of defiance could shatter the illusion of power that has ruled your life for years? Camille Johnson wiped the sweat from her brow, her apron stained with the faint ghost of red wine from a spilled glass earlier that night. At 30, she was no stranger to exhaustion, but tonight's shift at Le Cile, one of Manhattan's most exclusive fine dining restaurants, had pushed her to the edge. Her feet ached in the worn-out flats she couldn't afford to replace, and her smile, the one she plastered on for every patron, felt like it might crack under the strain. But Camille didn't have the luxury of breaking, not with her younger brother Michael, depending on her to cover his community college tuition, not with her mother Diane, battling diabetes and a heart condition that required medications they could barely afford. Camille's life was a tightrope. Every day, she balanced the demands of Le Cile's pretentious clientele with the weight of her responsibilities. At home, her Harlem apartment, a cramped two-bedroom she shared with Michael and Diane, was a far cry from the glittering world she served. The restaurant's chandeliers sparkled, the linens gleamed, and the patrons dressed in designer suits and gowns tossed around money like it was confetti. To them, Camille was invisible, just another pair of hands delivering their truffle-infused risotto or vintage Bordeaux. But she saw everything, the arrogance in their eyes, the casual cruelty in their demands, the way they assumed she was less than because of her job, her skin, her existence. Tonight, though, something felt different. The air was heavier, the room louder with the clatter of forks and the hum of self-important conversation. Camille moved through the dining room, her tray steady despite the chaos in her mind. Michael had called earlier, his voice tight with worry. Another bill from the hospital had arrived, and Diane's condition was worsening. Camille's paycheck, even with tips, wouldn't cover it. She pushed the thought down, focusing on the table she was serving, a group of tech executives, their laughter sharp and performative. At the head of the table sat Daniel Kensington, a name even Camille recognized, the billionaire CEO of Kensington Tech, a company that dominated the AI and cybersecurity industries, was a regular at Le Cile. His presence demanded attention. His tailored suit, his commanding voice, the way his colleagues hung on his every word. To Camille, he was just another entitled patron, but tonight, his eyes lingered on her a little too long, his smile a little too sharp. Another round of drinks, Daniel barked, barely glancing at her. And make it quick. Camille nodded, her face a mask of professionalism. Of course, sir. She turned away, her jaw tight. She dealt with worse than Daniel Kensington. Men like him thrived on power, on making others feel small. But Camille had learned long ago to keep her head high, even when the world tried to grind her down. The night wore on, and the restaurant buzzed with its usual opulence. Camille's shift was nearing its end when Daniel's table became the center of attention. His colleagues, emboldened by too much wine, grew louder, their laughter grating. Camille approached with the check, her movements precise, her smile unwavering despite the ache in her chest. She placed the leather-bound folder on the table, ready to retreat, when Daniel's hand shot out, stopping her. "Hold on," he said, his voice slick with condescension. He pulled a wad of cash from his wallet, peeling off a stack of $100 bills. "For you. A little something extra for your effort." The bills fanned out on the table, an obscene display of wealth. The amount was staggering easily. $1,000, maybe more. His colleagues smirked, watching her like she was a performer in their private show. Camille's stomach twisted. She knew what this was, not generosity, but a power play, a test. He expected her to grovel, to thank him profusely, to play the part of the grateful servant. She met his gaze, her dark eyes unyielding. "No, thank you," she said, her voice low but firm. "I don't need your charity." The table fell silent. Daniel's smile froze, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me," I said. "I don't need it." Camille's heart pounded, but she held her ground. Years of swallowing her pride, of enduring slights and insults, had led to this moment. She wasn't just refusing his money, she was refusing to let him define her worth. Daniel's face reddened, his ego bruised in front of his peers. "You're refusing me," he spat, his voice rising. "Do you know who I am? You think you're too good for my money. The dining room quieted. Heads turning, Camille felt the weight of every stare. But she didn't flinch. "I'm not here for your pity, Mr. Kensington. I earn my keep." His laughter was cold, cutting. "Earn your keep. You're a waitress. You're nothing without people like me." He stood, towering over her, his voice a weapon. "You're making a scene, sweetheart. You'll regret this." Camille's hands trembled, but her voice didn't waver. "The only thing I regret is wasting my time on you." The room gasped. Daniel's face twisted with fury, but before he could respond, Camille turned and walked away. Her head high, her heart racing. She didn't see the woman watching from a corner table. Her eyes sharp with interest. Sophie Kensington Daniels, estranged wife, had witnessed the entire exchange, and she saw something in Camille that no one else did. The next day, Camille arrived at Lucille expecting repercussions. Her manager, a nervous man named Paul, had already warned her about upsetting important guests. But instead of a reprimand, she found a note slipped under her locker. "Meet me at Café Amour, 3 p.m., Sophie Kensington." Camille's first instinct was suspicion. She'd heard of Sophie, former supermodel, philanthropist, and Daniel's wife, though rumors swirled about their strained marriage. Why would someone like Sophie want to meet her? Was this another game, another way to humiliate her? But curiosity, and a flicker of hope, pushed her to go. Café Amour was a stark contrast to Lucille Cozy. Unpretentious, with warm lighting and the scent of fresh coffee. Sophie sat at a corner table, her elegance understated in a simple blouse and jeans. She was in her late 40s, her beauty timeless but softened by a weariness in her eyes. When Camille approached, Sophie stood, offering a genuine smile. "Thank you for coming," Sophie said, gesturing to the seat across from her. "I saw what happened last night. You were extraordinary." Camille sat, wary. "I don't know what you want, Mrs. Kensington, but I'm not here to be your charity case." Sophie's laugh was soft, not mocking. "I don't want a charity case. I want a partner over coffee." Sophie explained her work community initiatives focused on education, healthcare, and economic empowerment for marginalized groups. She'd been watching Camille, not just last night, but for weeks, noticing her resilience, her quiet strength. "You stood up to Daniel in a way I never could," Sophie admitted. "I want you to help me build something real, something that matters." Camille hesitated. Sophie's world was foreign, filled with wealth and privilege she'd spent her life resenting. But there was something in Sophie's voice, pain, sincerity that resonated. Against her better judgment, Camille agreed to meet again, to learn more. Over the next few weeks, Camille and Sophie began working together. Sophie's initiatives were ambitious: a community center in Harlem, scholarships for low-income students, a health clinic for uninsured families. Camille brought her perspective, her knowledge of the community's needs, and her unyielding determination. She wasn't just a consultant, she was a force, challenging Sophie's assumptions and pushing for real change. As they worked, Camille learned more about Sophie's past. Sophie had grown up in a small town, her beauty her ticket out of poverty. But her marriage to Daniel had been a gilded cage. He'd controlled her, diminished her, used his wealth to keep her in line. Sophie's philanthropy was her rebellion, her way of reclaiming her power. "I stayed too long," she confessed one evening, her voice raw. "I let him make me feel small. You reminded me what it means to stand tall." Camille wanted to trust Sophie, but her own past made it hard. Growing up, she'd faced discrimination at every turn: teachers who dismissed her potential, employers who overlooked her, men who thought her body was their entitlement. Her father's abuse had left scars, physical and emotional, that she'd buried deep. Refusing Daniel's tip wasn't just about pride, it was about refusing to let another man define her. One night, as they worked late at Sophie's office, Camille opened up. "I've spent my life proving I'm enough," she said, her voice trembling. "But sometimes I don't know if I believe it myself." Sophie reached for her hand. "You are enough, Camille, more than enough. And you don't have to prove it to anyone." As Camille and Sophie's partnership grew, so did the stakes. One evening, Sophie revealed her true agenda. She wasn't just building community programs, she was gathering evidence to expose Daniel's fraudulent business dealings, Kensington Tech had been inflating profits, evading taxes, and exploiting vulnerable communities for years. Sophie had been quietly collecting documents, working with whistleblowers, but she needed someone like Camille, someone with fire, someone unafraid to help her bring the truth to light. Camille was stunned. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about dismantling a system that thrived on inequality. But it was dangerous. Daniel's reach was vast, his influence ironclad. If they failed, he could destroy them both. The plan was meticulous. Sophie had connections in the media, but they needed hard evidence, a smoking gun. Camille, with her knack for noticing details, found it. A hidden ledger in Daniel's office, uncovered during a catering event at his penthouse. The ledger detailed offshore accounts, bribes, and falsified reports. It was enough to ruin him. But Daniel wasn't oblivious. He'd grown suspicious of Sophie's activities and had his own spies. When he learned of Camille's involvement, he struck back. One night, as Camille left the restaurant, she was accosted by a man in a dark suit. His threats clear: back off, or your family pays. Fear gripped her, but so did resolve. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for Michael, for Diane, for every person Daniel had crushed. The confrontation came at a gala hosted by Kensington Tech, a glittering event, attended by New York's elite. Sophie and Camille had planned to leak the ledger to a journalist that night, but Daniel was ready. As Camille moved through the crowd, serving drinks to maintain her cover, Daniel cornered her, his voice low and venomous. "You think you can take me down?" he hissed. "You're nothing, a nobody." Camille met his gaze, her voice steady. "I'm not the one who's scared, Daniel. You're the one hiding." Before he could respond, Sophie took the stage, her presence commanding. She spoke of integrity, of justice, and then, in a move that stunned the room, she revealed the ledger's contents. Gasps rippled through the crowd as journalists scrambled to record her words. Daniel's face paled, his empire crumbling in real time. But the fight wasn't over. Daniel lunged for Sophie, his rage blinding him. Camille stepped in, her body a shield, her voice a thunderclap. "Enough," she shouted, drawing every eye. "You don't get to control us anymore." Security intervened, and Daniel was escorted out, his humiliation complete. The room buzzed with shock, but Camille felt something else: freedom. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's empire unraveled. Investigations were launched, and his fraudulent dealings were exposed. Sophie's initiatives flourished. With Camille at the helm of the Harlem Community Center, Michael received a scholarship, and Diane's medical bills were covered by a fund Sophie established. But the real change was in Camille. She'd spent her life surviving, proving her worth to a world that didn't care. Now, she saw her value, clearly not in money or status, but in her courage, her heart, her ability to lift others up. Her stand against Daniel had sparked a movement, inspiring others to speak out, to demand justice. One evening, as she stood in the community center, watching kids laugh and learn, Sophie joined her. "You changed everything," Sophie said softly. Camille smiled, her eyes bright. "No, we did." The camera pans out, the city skyline glowing against the night. Camille's voiceover echoes. "I used to think my worth was in what I could endure. Now I know it's in what I can build." Camille's story didn't end with Daniel's downfall. It was just the beginning. The community center became a beacon, a place where voices like hers, voices long silenced, could be heard. She became a mentor, a leader, a symbol of what it means to stand tall. And every time she walked into Lucille, her head was high, not because of the tips she earned, but because she knew who she was.